Y'all, what a beautiful night this has been. I'm so grateful for this night and for Lita for putting this night together. It's meant like a ton to me. And I know all of you. We all need this. So thank you, Lee. A white flurry of a blizzard raged and seemed to swallow the Montana highway whole as I drove. The winds howled and rattled the windows of my beat-up Subaru as my coworker Christy and I drove from a conference in Butte, Montana to her hometown in Livingston. As my wipers struggled to keep up, we debated the odds of anyone finding us if we drifted off into a snowdrift. I didn't know Christy well, but I knew one thing about her. She was fun, and she was good at being single. I was 26. I had just left the Mormon church in my marriage to a Mormon man. I had no idea who I was without the church, let alone how to date in a secular world. But when she suggested that we stop into the cannery in Bozeman, Montana to let the snow clear, I decided to lean into whatever the snowy bar experience had in store. The cannery was a cozy kind of watering hole where ranchers, college students, and professionals all gathered together for friendly banter. The drinks were strong and the jukebox set the mood. Christy wasted no time in teaching me about shots, and I was shocked at how fast those kicked in. Before you knew it, she and I were up on the bar, leaning into our best Coyote Ugly alter egos. However, during my best hip shimmy, my boot slipped and I almost fell. But as I gathered myself on that bar, I heard a laugh. Some people talk about love at first sight. For me, it was love when I first heard that laugh. It was warm, robust, and easy. And as I made my way down off the bar, the owner of that laugh was reaching up to help me. His hands were rough, his eyes were deep blue, and he had a smile that melted me. He wore a shearling jacket, iron jeans, and boots, of course. As it turned out, Christy knew him and his friend, so we spent the next few hours drinking and dancing some more. The snowstorm hadn't cleared up, so Christy decided it was best that we stay in Bozeman that night. Mike, the man with the laugh, had a condo downtown, and he offered us that all three of us could stay. So we went back to his place, drank copious amounts of water to make up for the shots, ate some frozen pizza, and listened to some more music. When it came time to go to bed, his friend Jim took the couch, my friend Christy took the guest room, and Mike offered to sleep on the floor so that I could have his bed. Well, as I sat on the edge of his bed struggling to get my boots off without a boot jack, he came to help me. And as I looked down at that man, I decided he did not need to be sleeping on the floor. I did tell him that there would be no funny business that night, and in fact there wasn't. We stayed up well past when our buzzes wore off, talking about all the paths of life that had brought us to this night. Mike had just ended his engagement with a Jackson Hole princess, and in fact there were still moving boxes all around that condo. The next morning at breakfast with all four of us again, the way he looked at me had changed. He was quiet and he held my gaze with contemplation that felt like concern almost. When Christy and I loaded up to leave, Mike asked for my number and I gave it to him. So over the following weeks, he called frequently, but we lived 4 hours apart so we didn't see each other. One day when I was sitting at my desk at work, he called me and asked about my plans for the weekend. And before I knew it, he'd convinced me and Christy to join him and his friends for a long weekend in Las Vegas. So off to Sin City we went. As a Mormon, I had never been to Vegas, let alone indulged in any of the activities that the city is known for. I felt like I was getting a weekend version, a Cliff Notes version of worldliness. I had just learned about shots, and suddenly I was going to topless pools, ordering martinis, letting it ride in poker, and had mastered the art of tucking a tip into a stripper's G-string. All along the way, he held my hand as my tour guide to this newfound intrigue. He was fascinated by watching me experience everything for the first time, as I was enthralled by it all. Before we went back to the hotel that night, he pulled me away from the group and he told me that he wanted to stay with me that night, but he didn't want us to have sex. So I agreed. We went back to his room, he drew a bubble bath, popped a bottle of champagne, and invited me into the bath. And then he proceeded to lather and shave my legs with the utmost care, planting kisses all along the way as we went. My mind was completely blown. I had never seen my body as something to be enjoyed, explored, or celebrated. Being raised in the LDS church, I was taught that my body was a temple, meant to be kept clean and pure to serve the Lord's higher purposes. Modesty was a celestial law, and I wore sacred underwear that allowed me to not wear anything that showed my shoulders or anything above my knee. After all, I certainly didn't want to be attracting heathens. Sex was forbidden outside of marriage, and even getting to first base would land you in your bishop's office, where you had the privilege of confessing your sins in explicit detail to the patriarchy as an essential part of your repentance process. I followed these rules and felt proud when I married a returned missionary in that Cinderella, Washington, D.C. temple a few weeks before I turned 19. After marriage, sex took on a very different role. My body's higher calling was to bear many shiny, happy Mormon babies. And that was our plan. But things didn't go as we had hoped. A year of trying turned to 2, and then 3, and eventually we began fertility treatments, artificial insemination, and in vitro fertilization. Nothing worked for 6 years. I was devastated, and I felt like my body, my temple, was failing me, and I grew to hate it. Sex became mechanical, timed around temperature checks, hormone injections, and withheld for upcoming procedures. There was nothing intimate about it. Each attempt only reminded me how I was failing at what I believed was my most divine calling. I watched my friends fill their pew at church with children while mine remained bare, and I grew bitter. But then that day, as Mike shaved my legs, something awakened within me. He served as a mirror, allowing me to see my body as beautiful and worthy of attention that wasn't solely focused on procreation. I had never experienced that kind of intimacy before, but I was hooked. We didn't have sex that night, and not for the next 2 nights either, but we kissed till we had rashes on our face and explored each other with our hands and mouth as thoroughly as possible. It came to our last night in Vegas, and I knew that I wasn't leaving there without experiencing all of that man. I can tell you that that night was more spiritual than any church service I had ever sat through. And it took me to a place in heaven that was reserved for only the most holy of saints. I would have stayed there in that hotel room with that man for at least another week before I needed or wanted anything else. But I went back to Great Falls, and he went back to Bozeman. And during the following weeks, we saw each other as often as we could, driving feverishly just to any place we could possibly get our bodies together. Once the gates were open, I wanted to know everything. Toys, ropes, lingerie, positions, oh my. And he was happy to show me all the ways that my body could experience pleasure. We had confessed our love despite the fast timeline, and I couldn't even imagine my life without that man or his hands on my body. A few magical months flew by, and then one day I received a call from Mike. When I answered, I could immediately tell something was off. He choked up and he told me he needed to discuss something difficult. I knew his engagement was put on the rocks by his fiance's relationship with alcohol. But the final straw came when she tried to run him over, when he tried to stop her from driving. The night ended with her crashing into their neighbor's home, and he broke off their engagement. Her father, a well-to-do figure from Jackson Hole, had come to town to talk to Mike. He begged Mike to give his daughter another chance. He told him that she was in the very best of rehabs and that she would have the best of outpatient care when she came back, and things would be different for them now. They booked a bougie resort in Jackson Hole 2 years in advance, and there were people flying in from all over the country to attend. Mike told me that he couldn't let these people down and that he was going to go through with the wedding that very weekend. He confessed that the trip to Vegas was his bachelor party. A fact that he nor his friends had told Christy or myself. I was devastated. I felt like the immediate loss of contact with him was like I'd lost an appendage. I would wake up in physical pain, longing for him and how I felt when I was with him. On the days leading up to the wedding, I held my breath, thinking he must surely change his mind. But when the pictures of the reception started to roll in on his groomsmen's Facebook page, I knew it was over. And just like that, my cowboy was gone.
Good.
I was shattered. But that year, as the snow thawed and I gathered all the bits and pieces of me back together, I realized something. He was lost, but I was found. I traded yearning for a cowboy's love for a deep love affair with myself. I no longer saw my body as a vessel of disappointment, but as a temple worthy of love and respect by my definition. I rediscovered the joys of my body in a whole new way. The sun felt different on my skin that year. My legs had a newfound sturdiness as I hiked mountain trails. I embraced sensuality in music, art, and dance. Everything looked different through this new lens. I embraced my sexuality not as a tool for attracting an ideal mate, excuse me, but as a source of power and pleasure within myself. I had learned my worth was not defined by neatly made check marks on a patriarchal to-do list. I was defined by the vibrant, joyful life that I was creating for myself every day. I will forever be grateful to that man for introducing me to the spice of life, but I know that it is my magic to sprinkle on all of my days. Thank you.